Hi, everyone. We're going to do the panel Strategies for Assessing Student Work. And our first presenter, Dan Garcia.
Thank you very much, everybody. So I'm very tall is what I am here. Is that the right thing? Let me know. OK. All right. So I teach a course called The Beauty and Joy of Computing. What a privilege to be able to share how much fun computing is with our students. We applied to Lockheed Martin for a Broadening participation grant, got that to help us develop some of the curricular material. Applied to Berkeley for a Bears Breaking Boundaries alliteration contest. Curriculum innovation, won that, as well as the UC Online pilot. In terms of the status, we've actually run this a couple of times. We saw the writing on the wall in terms of changing our non-majors course in computing. So we've done this a couple of semesters. This summer, we're actually teaching 25 high school teachers online. So we're kind of dipping our toe in the water in the online space. We haven't developed a resource yet. We haven't developed the kind of short lecture-y things yet. So we're just kind of taking our lectures, having them watch the webcast and seeing how that works. But they're all remote, taking this course. We've confirmed for 200 plus. We now expanded this to as big as we can in the fall. And this spring we go live, as you can see over there, we go live in January. So we're very excited about that. People always say this is Dan's course. I'm just the PI. Brian Harvey is the co-PI. And remember these folks' names. They're the amazing grad students that make it happen. Luke Seegers and Colleen Lewis, who developed a lot of the materials and were fundamental in making this course a success. The last session was on tools, and I wanted to share this amazing tool that we developed for computer science, which I think is an incredible interface. So just thinking about the interface of how you get through your classes. So we have a topic-based outline. It's a tree-based outline for our lectures. It's called the Weiner Lecture Archive. We developed this about 5 or 6 years ago. What it allows you to do, this was an old technology in Real, and Ben helped us with some of this. You see a tree structure. Top of the tree is the whole course, CS3. It says 16 hours, which means that in the background, if you click that link, it will open up a Real player and show you a 16-hour movie. So it stitches invisibly all the videos together and plays it then. And all of a sudden, every hour I change clothes. It's kind of an interesting thing, but that's really, or I hope I do at least. What's also nice is you can divide, rather than have your lecture, currently you have webcasts which are done per lecture, so you have an hour, then an hour, then an hour, then an hour. Even if a topic kind of spreads across 2 lectures or 3 or 4 lectures, here it's seamless. It's a 4-hour lecture. If you're talking about recursion, which is 3 lectures in a row, it might have started halfway through lecture 7 and end halfway through lecture 12 or something. You just don't have to worry about when that is. It's a one level of abstraction above that. Again, a computer science concept we teach in this course. As well as going into the one particular detail of that. So you can go down to find the example that he did about Pascal's triangle, click on that and watch a 5.5-minute lecture. So it's an incredible way to think about dividing up your class and viewing your lectures if you want to do that. It's really, really nice and really seamless. We also have this really great feature, which is you have the lectures and the slides or website, and as the lectures move forward, as they move past the next time trigger, the slides update. So you just sit with your hands behind your head, and if you have 2 screens, lectures on one side, slides are there, and the slides just update as the things are going on. It's really very nice. We built that quite a few years ago, and we're hoping to think of how can we bring some of that technique into the future. I hope you're all using Piazza. I talked about this at the last meeting we had in this room. It's incredible. They just lost their Z. Yesterday, they were 3 Zs because someone had squatted on the word Piazza, and they eventually got enough funding to be able to buy it from that squatter. It's like, oh, I have to buy it, but they need the name Piazza. So incredible way to have a wiki-based question-answer situation. It's transformational. You all should be using it. It's free for all courses. Piazza, 2 Zs, very, very good tool to know about. All right, we're talking about assessment. Let's jump right in there. So just people have been talking about their courses, and a little plug for that. We thought about our non-majors course because of a huge statistic that's everywhere. We see this in computing. We might not realize this in other fields, but this is within engineering. You have the change in percentage of where are people flowing in the last, say, 20 years, and people are flowing out of computer science, out of computing, and into other fields. You'll notice this. So that's a problem because the Department of Labor Statistics says that we need folks to do this. Our advisory board said, while we're thinking about our non-majors course, why not think about broadening the net of people you bring in rather than have it as a gatekeeper, have it as a welcoming, leave some popcorn trails so people come to you and leave some candy around. This is a fundamental book by Jane Margolis, Stuck in the Shallow End, talks about that computing is an equity issue. The number of African Americans who die of drowning because of not having access to swimming pools when you're young at formative stages, similar to not having access to good computing when you're young. That's the reason we don't see those folks in our computing classes. So this is a critical thing, and all the arrows are pointing into high school for that. In high school, there is a computing exam. It's called the AP, or you all know about the AP exams that you took or understand. They help articulate high schools with computing. You can take computing courses. You can take college courses in high schools. Everybody's growing. Calculus, biology, everyone's growing. This is since '97. Computer science is flat. And when you zoom into it, in fact, we actually canceled the AB exam. So if we're the only AP exam of all the AP that's actually losing ground. As we're all growing, as kind of the number of folks in the United States is growing, we're the only AP exam in computing is the only AP exam that's actually losing ground. So that's not so good. We also have the worst gender balance. So things are really broken. I'm just trying to tell you, things are really broken in the state of computing at the intro level across the country. And so part of our goal is try to fix that. I'm kind of giving you a tease of why I'm showing you all this data. So, we have 18% women in our class. Even calculus and stats are doing about equal. So the conclusion from the AP says, let's make a new course. And the course shouldn't be about just programming. It should be a much broader course, a much larger perspective. And the goal is broadening participation. How can we bring the whole world into computing? And the goal, the other nice thing about having the AP be part of this is that you say, Dan, get to the UC stuff. Well, we're getting to it in a second. The reason that this is important is because AP is the single point of natural leverage. All of the requirements of what has to happen in high schools is done at a state-by-state basis. The only single point of national leverage is the advanced placement exam. So it's the one place you can make a big fundamental change across all 50 states at once. So they're introducing a new course called the Gold Standard Course, AP Principles. There's a website, csprinciples.org, if you're curious about it. They chose 5 pilots to get this rolling. We were fortunate to be chosen as one of the AP pilots. So that's really exciting. So not only are we an online pilot, but we're also an AP pilot. And that means that we're teaching a course that it's the model that high schools could be teaching themselves. So we have a potential to have a course that is reflected across 10,000 schools across the country, maybe even more. So that's a really amazing potential there. Not only a potential for change, national change, but a potential for being able to have lots of folks looking at our course and taking our course online. So that's very good for at least revenue purposes in terms of the loan. So here it is in one slide. In one slide, here is our course. This is the details for our computing audience. There's big ideas of programming, and these are the things you saw in all non-majors courses across the world. Even before having a transformational look at what a course should be, these are the big ideas of programming you've always seen where you're doing things, you're actually in some interface doing that. The big ideas is the new stuff. This whole right side of the slide reflects the right side of the brain that is new for courses like that. Left side is logical, right side is kind of, let's put some cultural context in here. Let's demystify some computing. Let's talk about some great research summaries. Not my research project, but here's the entire field of AI and HCI and other things. Here's some apps that change the world, some great stuff saving the world with computing, cloud computing, limits of computing. We have the beauty, we call it Beauty and Joy because there's a Beauty and Joy movement that's happening. We try to introduce and infuse Beauty and Joy in introductory computing classes that I happen to be very connected with our Computer Science Education Conference once a year. So we titled our course to kind of reflect that. So all lab work is in pairs. We use a pair programming technique. Laurie Williams of NC State pioneered that. We have 2 3-week projects in which students actually get down and dirty and do their fun thing. That's been in every course. But that's really fun because we have an amazing new IDE or integrated development environment. And we have a 3-page paper, which has now become a blog. I can talk about that for a second. I just want to show you a demo of, this is the final project of a student. These are 3 students. They had never programmed before coming into this class. So they created this thing called Magic Machine. They were music majors. They wanted to use their own skill. By the way, the other thing about the Beauty and Joy is we let them have the project of their choice. This is critical in terms of assessment. It's not, here, do my project because it's easier to grade if I ask you to all do the same thing. No, you pick the project And I feel like the Saturday Night Live. You choose the cow. You cut it. You clean it. No. So you pick the project. You then go and have an interaction with your TA to make sure the difficulty is the right level, and then you launch into your project. So it really is all about the student's needs. So let me just show you the example. This is BYOB software based on Scratch. Scratch is publicly available free from MIT. We have added on to it to make it rigorous enough for university use, and we're very excited about that development. So that's part of what we've been doing here. So let's start this up. I'm now going to full screen this guy, have sound here, and now, and I hope this is the microphone will work, you can click anywhere. So let's just click, I don't know what we're doing. Let's just click here, see what happens there. Oh, interesting. Okay. Where's Shlomo? Come on up here. I need somebody who knows I'm music here. I have no idea. Delightful stuff. Students, I play this forever. I love this thing. This is an amazing application. And students walked into this course, these 3 students, never having touched a computer for programming before this web surf. But this is what they created at the end of 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Incredible stuff. So really happy about that. All right, so let me stop this. So great course, great excitement. The reviews are off the charts in terms of how much these guys love it. Let me now show you some format and then assessment. So the format we have, when Mike was looking into designing this course with us and thinking about the space, we said, what's the maximum number of contact hours we could ever have? This is before the online came out. We said, well, chemistry has 7. All right, 7. Let's do whatever Mark does, we'll do. So 7 contact hours, let's hit that hard. So we have 2 lectures and then lab. It's a lab-centric course. We have 4 hours of lab. This helps a lot when we go online because the labs are all in Moodle and they're all online. So that really does help in terms of transfer there. Discussion, we guys have talked about how to have discussion a little bit. We have reading from a great book. The book is free, so that's good. The other key thing is every single resource in this class is free. Part of the goal of that was to be able to export to high schools. So if they do that, there's no requirement at all. Software, even the book is a PDF. You can get it for free. Wonderful stuff. We have relevant chapters. Current events every day. This is critical in terms of making a course. You have a course in a box. That doesn't work. You have to kind of update that to make sure that's current. We do peer instruction, as Mark does. We do this 3 to 4 times during the lecture. The students love this. And we buy the clickers for them. Students for years said that the clickers are worth the time but not worth the money. But if you buy them for them, they say 100% it's a slam dunk, let's do it. So they love that. So this is my last slide. Thinking about the assessments, how do we think of this? And maybe many of you have similar questions of how to map your courses to online if you're just starting the process, if you're kind of not in the June launch but maybe in the later launches. Lecture with clickers is what we do now. How would that map? Well, there's the Khan Academy mini lectures. We had a whole session here about how to make your own videos and how to do it on the high or low budgets. I love the Khan Academy. What I also love about the Khan Academy is it tracks where you are. It knows what you finished. It knows what you can do. Moodle can help you with that as well. That's really nice. What I also love about Khan Academy is it gives you this kind of rote exams. We heard that before a second ago about what Khan Academy does in terms of it gives you these, one kind of learning is just a lot of just repeat here's a drill and skill kind of stuff. Well, in computer science, you can auto-generate questions, right? I can have a recursive thing where you're doing different things, and I can have that be a script that auto-generates that. So in the same way you can easily auto-generate additions for kids learning how to add, I can auto-generate questions. So that's a tremendous potential, and we're thinking of putting some part of our budget to actually working with some of that. So that's really exciting. Or we're thinking, well, maybe it's more exciting to be able to have that synchronous lecture. There's one model of going fully async or fully. What if we made lecture synchronous? The labs, you can do it anytime you want to. That's fine. But what if we made lecture synchronous and we had one TA in the front room being able to handle questions from afar? That way, if you're confused during lecture, you don't kind of have to send an email and get an answer back a week later when it wasn't relevant. When it's right there and you're getting confused about something the person said, you can ask that question. So we're kind of contemplating whether we should force a synchronous version of that for lecture. Then we have labs, and our current labs, again, it's a lab-centric course, so 4 hours out of the 7 contact hours are students come to lab, they launch up Moodle, it knows who they are, it knows what they finished last week, it knows what they should be doing now, and it takes them through a 2-hour activity. So we have lab assistants shadowing, or as Mike says, sharking, which is like sniffing, they're sort of smelling the water for confusion, and then they'll attack, pounce, swarm, and then they come in. So, and we have tons of lab assistants we have helping who do this on a volunteer basis. So, how do we take this online? Well, that's pretty easy. You know, the labs can be async. You can have a Piazza level forum of like ask questions come up rather than answering the same question over and over and over and over. If it's in Piazza, it's one common shared answer. In computer science, we call this the single source of truth, a very important idea in CS. So you can have Piazza as the single source of truth for that particular question and the official answer once and for all rather than have to repeat it 1,000 times. In the labs, you often have a queue. You use the whiteboard for, well, I go up and I have my question. I'll write, either I raise my hand or if I see a lot of hands up, I'll put myself on a queue, and then a queue is a linked list. And so I'll go through and the TA or lab assistant will cross off. All right, where's Susan? Oh, Susan, let me go over and answer Susan's question. Okay, cross it off. Where's Jaime? Jaime, I'll answer that one. You can imagine a virtual queue where people get questions answered if that's a real-time thing. So you can imagine actually a synchronous lab where people are ready and they're just queuing up with questions, or maybe even Google Doc, people just typing into a thing. We're all exploring how to make that space. That's not a big deal. The projects in the blog, so again, you write a 3-week project, you submit it. It's graded in the background by a reader. That happens already, so that goes online. That's not an issue. They have a blog. I should show you, but I didn't have a screen capture. We decided to use Google Sites to have social grading. So students write a blog, a 1-page blog on any computing science topic any topic in computing that they find interesting to them. Again, interesting to them is a critical piece of this course. They go on that, and the students are forced to read other blogs. We assign them 2 other ones, and then they choose on the topic list, or choose based on the title of the person of the other blogs, they choose a 3rd one of their choice. And then they have to respond to the blog. So they have to kind of internalize it and then feed something back that shows that they have read it and understood it and respond that. And then they're graded on all 3 of those. They're graded on their own blog and their responses to show that they actually read it and understood that. And then we grade that whole thing. That's all graded in the background by readers. Again, that goes online. That's not an issue. Here's what we have, which is interesting. We decided to have with computer exams. Students for many, many years have said, why am I doing all my work in the lab with the computer in the lab, doing this great BYOB interface, and then on the exam, I'm on paper. That's not how I've ever done anything in class. Why are you asking me to do this on paper? So we said, that makes a lot of sense. So all along, we've actually had online, so I'll say with computer exams to distinguish from the word online. So you actually come into lab, there's no internet, we unplugged internet cables, and just you and the integrated development environment, and you actually, here's a sheet of paper with the question, and you can use your thing to do whatever you need to do, and you simulate, and then you submit that on the system. We plug it back in, we submit that. So that's really great. We had that online system. We could have that there. We could have a with computer thing. That's actually quite easy. Well, now we're up to paper exams. Imagine a world before time. What does that mean? So imagine a paper exam that you typically give now. What would you do if your entire, and this is, I guess, addressed, everyone needs to answer this question. I don't have a solution. So I have every one of you now goes back to your home. You're now taking my course from your home. It's time for your final exam worth 30% of your grade. How do I verify that you are taking it in a classic, take the exam, 3 hours, no help, no looking to your side, no looking online? How do I verify that? I need some help with that answer. So that's kind of, I'm giving you some solutions we have, and I'm opening up this question of I need to solve that final exam problem. My potential thing is a proctor. You have to find a local proctor that I trust, kind of like getting it verified when you're getting the document verified, and I fax or I PDF the exam to your proctor, and the proctor guarantees that you can take the exam that locally, like a high school person or another university person. That's the only solution that I have to that final exam problem, but I'm open to suggestions, and I'm sure people have thought about that before. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we'll do some questions now directly for Dan.
Or answers to my last question, too. Yeah, Greg.
Thanks, great presentation, Dan. So I do online exams all the time, and I let them look everything up online, but there's a lot of questions, and it's speed that tells you if somebody really knows what they're doing or not. Right? And whether it's them who are actually doing it or not, they can only really succeed in the exam if they've followed the course for 3 months, right? Because if you do something for 3 months, you get fast at it, and it's speed that determines the quality.
Interesting.
There. So.
I'm going to push back on that only because I know that people have different speeds of doing things, and we always give like 3 or 4 times the actual time it takes our TAs to take our exam, just to make sure that the full range of people, of how long people take to do things and natural cognitive ability doesn't factor into their grades. So I don't want speed to be the issue. So there's a little bit of, I hear what you're saying, but I want to push back to say I don't think I want to go there. Frank.
Two things, Dan. One about the proctoring. We got a list from Berkeley of the approved proctors in California as well as across the country, so I can forward you that.
That's perfect.
They pay $30 or so and go in, and a lot of extension centers actually have proctor test facilities where you just send them the PDF. They'll for $30 or whatever, they'll have the students sit there in some room, and then they'll mail it right back to you.
That's great.
This is National University does it, and it is a solved problem if they're willing to have them pay $30. Okay. But what I wanted to talk about was this alignment with the AP type thing, which I think is wonderful. On the other hand, I usually advise people, if they do ask me, don't do AP classes. If they can avoid it, go to community college, take the class directly from the community college, because then it's real college credit. There's no test at the end that determines whether that whole course that you took actually counts, and there's no question of whether a university will accept it, because as you know, every university can choose whether to accept AP and how to use it, right? Whereas you take it at a community college, it's college credit, it's articulated all through California, right, through the California
Well, not
schools.
necessarily. A lot of community colleges courses aren't articulated with our intro series, but a particular non-majors course would be. In this case, it would be. But in general, you have to go through assist.org to figure out what the articulation is. But I hear what you're saying. That's interesting.
And a lot of community college courses are offered online. So AP, in my opinion, is something that is good for a lot of students, but if you have the opportunity to go to community college and take it, and high school students can take community college courses, by the way. A lot of principals will deny that. They have to get permission. And I think that needs to go away. We need to let students take community college courses, get real college credit while they're in high school. So I'd like to see what your thoughts are on that, of also aligning with the community colleges, especially those that are going online.
It's quite interesting. I think that there's other benefits, tertiary benefits of suggesting that a student go to community college, because it makes going to college a reality for them. Oh, you mean, that's not too bad. I'm just commuting here and kind of, I'm around, they get to fit down on campus. That's an exciting thing for them in general. I think that's there's room for us to grow in terms of connecting with community college. I 100% agree with that, because there are similar courses being offered at community colleges, and I'm hoping that none of them are in the pilots now. There's around 2 pilots, and none of them are community college. They're all big 4-year schools, and they're all high schools partnering with them. So the community college space is kind of left out right now in the AP conversation, but there is certainly room to explore that space. Thank you for that suggestion. I didn't really tell you the big, huge slam dunk on this, which is we need to ramp up to 10,000 teachers. So what I'm really excited about is this course being offered and being taken online in the summers by the 10,000 teachers that need to learn this new AP course to be able to do that. So there's a 10K effort to hire 10,000 new teachers. They need to be trained well, and I'm hoping that this can play a fundamental part in doing that. So I can already imagine, we're training right now 23 teachers, 25 teachers this summer. We're kind of getting good at that, and now next summer, hopefully opening up to several hundreds. And we've already applied to NSF for 2 grants to do exactly that. So that's exciting. As well as people telling their students, if you want Berkeley credit, here's an online course and you can take it. And bam, it's the same kind of course, because we don't have a teacher to offer computing in our school, but Berkeley is doing it. So we'll support those high school students from across the country who kind of want to jump up and do that. So we're really excited about this course having an impact on the national landscape.
Yeah. Hi. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the details of the lecture archive interface that you sort of moved through quickly.
Sure.
With the video linking and you said the sort of slide synchronization stuff. You could just talk a little bit more about the different tools and stuff that are going on there and how you've worked them out.
Okay. So this started as a project of thinking about, for the longest time, we had the webcast folks film our classes, and we would get a chunk of 45 or 30, depending on whether we had 2 or 3 hours of lecture a week. We'd have this number of 1-hour lectures just in a bag. And we had problems of, A, you have to have a supplementary set of slides, and you don't have those synchronized, and that was what we did over here. And B, the navigation was just really raw. We had a list of lectures, and you have to kind of scroll your way into it to try to find what you wanted. We said there's got to be a way to think of this in a more clever way. So we came up with the tree hierarchy. What that involves is for every lecture, you essentially have to build a hierarchy of just how did the course go, and in terms of, usually the lectures go, usually as I walk my way through my tree, as I walk kind of a left traversal of the tree, I walk through my lectures in time from 0 to the end. So that's nice. The advantage of this also is, I'm not answering your question yet, but the advantage of this is also, I can have another piece, which is, how about all the examples, right? You can have another another tree that says, here's, by the way, another mapping on the same data. It's just an abstraction above it. So you can now look at all the examples I worked out. And the other nice thing about this is you can cut out, in the lectures, you can cut out all the things that are temporal. All the things that, oh, by the way, there's an exam. I moved the time from 6 to 7. Nobody cares about that after that semester. So you cut that out, which is really nice as well. So all it takes is to mark a time code. So we hire some students to watch the video. They mark a time code for everything that's a new slide, a new kind of concept. And then all of those concepts come together, and we then, from all those time codes across the entire semester, try to build the tree. So it starts from the bottom up. I basically hire the top student. I find the A+ student from last year, and I say, do you want a job, good money? They said, done. And they'll just watch the lectures that they just aced. So they understand the concept as well as anybody in class. And they mark the time codes of all the concepts. And then they help form the tree. And we kind of work with them to edit to find the perfect tree. And once that's done, that just Excel spreadsheet, we have a program that takes that Excel spreadsheet, which is time code, lecture, file, what it is, description. And that just becomes, that gets slurped into a program which generates this and generates that. And this is a PHP hosted site. And the webcast folks were hosting the videos. So it's very easy. And it's all real, and the nice thing is that the stitching together is the coolest part of the whole thing. It just invisibly stitches the videos that are relevant together. That is so, so cool. And I believe that YouTube API supports that stitching together, but we haven't explored that yet. I can demo it, yeah. Do you want to see a demo of it? Would that be useful? I don't know. Okay. Do you have time? So, 62. I'm sorry? Yeah, let's hit it. So here's the Berkeley site. Here's all of our 4 main courses in our intro series. I'm going to go to 61C, which is the course that I would teach. And here's the early topic-based outline, because I'm in Mac, I can do this so easily. So here's that. I say, oh, that's cool. Let's say performance. Actually, performance is, I clicked it to say launch. When you click it, it launches, or I can hit this little triangle, and that opens it up, and that opens this. So I can open and close like you guys have seen in lots of file finders and Windows Explorer. I then go to downloads, and it downloads a RAM file. This is the RAM file now, and so now it's playing the video. So that's the beginning, and here, and I need more screen space. Oh, that's the thing. Don't know what that is. But here is this happening. Here's that. So there's my class, and there's here. And the cool thing is, so the class is going to start at some point. Maybe if I scroll over, here's
different parts of the hardware.
So I don't know what, this is generating an error, but it's still working. I don't know what that little error message is. But notice that I scrolled to the middle of the lecture, and the slides updated for exactly what he was talking about. So if you have 2 windows, I make the lecture full screen, I make the slides full screen, put my hands behind my back, I watch the whole thing. It's really amazing. So, and this video is whatever I clicked on. I clicked on performance. That's a 27-minute lecture. And if you look here, it should say, well, it's showing the overall thing, but it'll be an overall 27-minute lecture in the process of that. Question?
Searchable in the text. Oh. Is it searchable in the text or video form by any kind of term, other terms or means?
No. No search facilities at all. All we've done is add time codes and provide an interface for that. So there's no other way to get to that in a way that you'd normally search for a transcript. So we don't have any of that. Although it's an interesting idea.
You have a weighted sum, and you get the total CPI. As an example,
yeah, he isn't actually. No. He's. They start him young. There's a question? Did you?
Yeah. Oh.
He's giving a guest lecture. Right. Yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Can you just explain? So once you've finished putting together the course, how much instructor time does it take to run the course?
Are we talking CS10 or are we talking the lecture archives?
The CS10 actually.
Okay.
So you know you want to do the course.
Right.
I didn't have a very good sense of how many, how much instructor time it takes to run the course each time.
Okay. Well, recall that there's still go to format textbooks. We still have 2 hours of lecture a week. The TAs are running labs. So running the course involves making sure the TAs are up on the labs, going up and giving your 2 one-hour Sage on the Stage model, answering all the questions that come up, and writing exams. So this is our common model of the traditional course. So you're talking the online version now? Yeah, okay. So the online version of the course, it depends whether we decide to go synchronous with the lectures or not. our model for January 2012 is to run the online version synchronous with that. So the exam, they're both all ready for my first quiz at the same time. They're both ready for midterm at the same time. They take the same exam. Just the online folks, I send it out to proctors and get it done. The people in class come to Wheeler and take the exam there. So in that sense, I'm still teaching the same course if I make the lectures synchronous and I just have the folks online watching these remotely. If we decide to go with the Khan Academy with the assessment that I was talking about doing, then they wouldn't be watching lectures, but I'd still be running the same thing. So you say, how much work am I doing for just the online part? Well, I've done the lectures, put a lot of effort in there. This is a Dan question, right? You put all the effort in the beginning. What actual effort is there when you're launching it? My lectures in a box. The lectures in a box with the Khan Academy assessment stuff. That's done. My labs are in a box. That's done. In a way, the amount of time that I need to spend is really, I can redirect towards innovative exams, towards updating things, but you, in some sense, are taking away that the time that you normally do a lecture prep and the lecture delivery, it's gone now because I put all this work into, in advance, putting my lectures in a box. I don't need to do that. And that's where most of my time teaching the normal course is spent, writing exams and doing my lectures and making sure my staff is happy and trained. So if I put my lectures in a box, then all the time I spent with the lecture prep and delivery is gone. I can now focus on exams and making sure the class is running well and questions are answered and da-da-da-da. So it's great. I think it's in some sense, I can be spending time more efficiently.
Okay, actually, we need to go ahead and move to the next speaker.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, well, we can talk afterwards. Sure.
Okay. My presentation came about a week ago when Dan and I were talking on the telephone, and we started talking about assessment, and he asked me if I would do this, and I'm going to tell you straight out that nobody knows how to do assessment for online teaching. If you think you do in large classes, you don't. There's no data that exists. And so my presentation is all about telling you what my ideas are going to be, and then we're going to talk about it because there is no easy way to do that. So I'm going to discuss my point of view from a biological science perspective. So I'm going to set up the class first, and then I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you exactly how we are going to do it in my class, and how we've tried it in our class and how it did not work. The class, think of it as a lower division science course in the life sciences or in biology. It's information-based. What that means is when I say information-based, there is no subjectivity to it at all. The class I'm teaching right now is Nutrition 111, which is Introduction to Metabolism and Human Nutrition. And the fact of the matter is, vitamin A is vitamin A, and you don't need to discuss it. It's always going to have the same structure. You're always going to absorb it right. And so it's the exact kind of course that is built for online because it's simply information. I'm going to be talking about large classes. My class right now for Nutrition 111 AV is a little over 500. It's an online course, but I'm going to use large as 200. And then GE, and this is something that you're all going to have to think about as the new world order of the University of California comes about, and TA support. The new rubric for my college, which is the College of Agriculture at the University of California, we will only get one TA for classes over 200, okay? If you have a writing component, you can get more, but that is now negotiable. It is no longer a rubric. So you understand what's going to happen here. The reality, at least in the College of Agriculture, which is a huge college, is going to have to think about how they're going to give courses. And just about everything is going to be on Scantron. I can guarantee it, because if you got one TA, you're not going to do anything else. So I always say GE if TAs are available, because GE has a writing component to it. No professor in their right mind is going to have a class of 500 and have a writing component. Okay, the how-tos. So these are the only two slides that I have. And so we're going to talk about how you give multiple exam questions online. How do you do this? It's a question that everybody has in their mind. It's going to be a reality, at least in the science-based course, and we have to figure out how we're going to do it. So of course the first thing that one would think about is a computer lab. So there's plenty of computer labs on the Davis campus that you could house enough people. You could just say, okay, on Tuesday at between 10 and 11 o'clock, each computer lab has to dedicate at least 10 computers to my course. So you have a 3-hour base, you got 10 computers, you can figure it out for yourself that you can do it. So you walk into a computer lab, you show them your ID, they have little cubby holes that say, okay, you got to put everything over here. Now, you see the problem already that as an instructor, you're going to have to coordinate with IT so that there are computer labs that do it that way. Now, you don't have to do it this way. There's all kinds of different ways. You can just have an open book test and say do it wherever you want, and that'll be fine. But I will guarantee you that there are going to be a lot of people on your courses committee that are going to say, I'm not so sure that we should be giving tests that way. So you're going to have to deal with that problem. You may get it by, may not get it by, but you're going to have to deal with it one level or another. The Davis problem. Okay, the Davis problem that we have right now with the courses committee is that in their guidelines for the online courses, it specifically states that due to technical difficulties with ethics and test taking, all tests on online course must be done in a classroom. Okay, so there's the Davis problem number one. You have an online course. Dan would love it to sell to the military to make some money for this. How are you going to do that? Because Davis says, I can't give you credit for this test because you're not in a classroom. Now, I've talked to the individual who is currently the chair for the courses committee, and we have an acronym for it. It's called COSI. So if I say that, COSI means Courses of Instruction, the Committee on Courses and Instructions, and they're willing to work with you, but it's still an academic Senate committee, which means that you have to please everybody on that committee. So you're already faced with a problem, at least at Davis. Now, San Diego, as far as I understand, they won't even let you do online, period. So this is a little injection of reality because I've had to deal with this, and I happened to be the COSI chair at the time these were put into place. And yes, the technology that was there was not good enough to give it online. It is today. And so you're going to have to start dealing with your own issues there. The timed exam. Now, we've all thought of this. This is not new. Nobody thinks about it in these terms, thinking of it as brand new. But you set up an exam which they have a certain amount of time frame in which they have to take the exam. So you are increasing your security by saying, okay, well, you're not gonna be able to take this exam for 2 hours and have all your buddies come by, and you can't take a video picture of it or a phone picture of it, send it off to your buddies and go, because you only got 45 minutes to do it, and you better get it done in that time because every question that you don't answer counts against you. So that's one security. The Davis problem. Okay, these are the two Davis problems. Let me tell you a story about what happened to me the first time I tried online exams. Poor Kirk has heard this 100 times and he has to hear it again. But you have a real problem at all your campuses, and it's called bandwidth. And how many people can take an exam at exactly the same time and get away with it? Well, 6 years ago in my Nutrition 111 course, I had gone to the people who run our system, which is called, it was a Davis portal at that time, and it's called My UC Davis. And that's where you had to get onto to take the exam. And so we had, at that time, there was 300 people in my class. We had set up every computer lab. We had set up all the exams. We had gone through My UC Davis. I'd talked to the IT people. Everything was in order. We had got everybody there ready to go. And the first class comes in. We had 30 computers set up. We had 2 proctors set up. I get there and I'm going, God, I am just the online stud. I mean, look at this. We are having a test online. And so I'm standing there and we had timed it so it starts right at a certain time. It starts and we're waiting and people are doing. Then all of a sudden, not just in my room, but the entire UC Davis campus goes blank on the My UC Davis portal. And we all just stand there and look. And nobody, I mean the entire Davis portal went out. Not my class, but the entire, I've got to say that strong. And so, is it Janet, Jan, the person who used to run so I get on the phone right away, and of course I'm a very calm person, and I get on the phone right away, and I'm screaming, what the hell's going on? I've got this test going on here. Well, it worked when we were doing it. How many people are taking the test? And I said, well, right now, 30, and dead silence. And she says to me, well, I didn't know you were all going to take the test at the same time. True story. And so at that time, we crashed the systems because 2 people at exactly the same time hit the save button on the page and crashed the system. Now, that's the Davis problem. It's still a problem today because of bandwidth. And so you have to think, how are you going to do this under these conditions? It's a little better today, but it ain't going to handle 500 people all taking an exam at the exact same time. It's not going to do it. So you have to think about the timed exam, when people are going to do it. You've got to talk to your IT people. You've got to figure out whether or not the bandwidth is going to be there for you to do it. And finally, the only thing that we can now do, and this is the only thing that we're working on, is actually having a unique exam for each individual. The new software, which are available for quiz makers, allows you to randomize every single exam. So you could actually have, and the way you set it up is pretty easy. You have a test bank, and if all of you have ever used a textbook, you know you can call up the author or the publisher, and the publisher will send you either by a booklet or online a test bank. And so those test banks can be simply put in a background database, and all you have to do is every time that a student logs in is simply hit that login. That will generate a brand new exam specific for that individual, and it can be graded and turned back to them exactly at the same time they're taking it. So you increase your security quite a bit by even under 500, you could have the same exam. So I have nothing else to say. So let's just talk about these kind of problems that you're faced at your own campus and ways that you think that you can get around these large classes and ways in which you can take exams. Okay. Sure.
So when we were doing our online exams, we only have a lab of 30. That's our lab. We could have borrowed other labs. We decided to have one lab of 30. So we had 3 different versions. And we worked really, really hard to have them the same difficulty. And then at the end, we actually took the whole lab and assessed what that error was, and this average. We ooched them around so they kind of had the same mean. When you have you're grabbing from a big soup of questions, how do you then verify that this isn't a killer question that no one ever gets, and you happen to get the death question kind of on that? How do you work that in terms of stabilization?
I call it life. Life ain't fair, okay? And if you're gonna give a test that
noogie answers.
Well, I mean, that's the way I look at it. Some days you get it good, some days you get it bad, and we could try to be as fair as possible to everyone, but it never works out that way. So my issue on that, I have given that thought, and there's a couple ways that you can do that. The first people that take the exam, okay, so what? But you got an unfair situation going on. But then you can get the statistics back, and you can look at all the statistics: who answered what, who did not do what, who didn't do this, and so the next time you can set it up. So there are minor ways around it, but I'm really of the belief that life ain't fair.
Well, but this was billed as an information-based course, right? So it should be relatively easy. Here I am.
Oh, we haven't heard your voice before, and here we go.
It should be relatively easy to you know, well, this one's vitamin A, and this one's vitamin B, and this one's vitamin
Oh, yeah,
C.
and
right?
exactly right.
For other kinds of courses, the problems are more nuanced. And
oh, that's right. And so thanks for that. I didn't even think about that. I guess that's the reason. But you know, these are going to be short answer. They're going to be multiple choice. They're going to be true and false. They're going to all be taken from a test bank. So there's really no nuances there. And you're absolutely right. Thank you.
If I could comment too, we use a system in Chem 1 where we let the students preview the exam questions. So there's the exam questions are still taken from a large database, but they don't know which ones they'll get. And in chemistry, you have to work out the problem anyway, so we can change the numbers. So we let them preview a fraction of the problems that they may get, and we hope to, you know, minimize the spread you get in the curve by saying, well, if you work hard before the exam, that is, you do these self-tests, then you'll know what to expect on the exam. So we're hoping to minimize the gotcha problems by saying, well, you could have looked in advance, and you could have done more homework in advance to get the problem that would be on the exam. It's one technique we're using to try and eliminate that problem.
And I guess I should say in follow-up to that is that my online course, at the end of every module, there are self-assessment exams. And so they get pretty used. By the time they get to my exam questions, they'll be pretty used to what they're going to be about and how they're done. So that's another technique we use. Yeah, Jim. Oh.
No, this is really interesting. But I thought maybe people had this figured out, but obviously we haven't. But isn't there? Couldn't you create some sort of virtual proctoring, and some sort of protocol? There is that. Proctor U. And so, how does this work? You haven't mentioned this. I mean, I could see like a video, or sorry, a webcam on that person where they're monitoring. Is that the concept? So why couldn't this? Why was that not brought up as a concept?
I have not discussed that. I haven't looked at those issues. I have thought about things about some of the little things that you could also use, such as you know, it's timed. Okay, that's the first thing. You only have so much time per question, so if you're looking questions up, you got that problem going on. There are ways in which you can do certain things, such as there are programs which you can, if you leave the current program, it will notice that you're gone and then shut you down. I'm talking about somebody viewing them on the security camera. Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
I actually can address that.
Okay.
There's a program called ProctorU, a service actually, an online service called ProctorU, and I don't know if it can be a subscription service or if it's per exam or per student. We'd probably want to look into that. But the idea is that you check in online with somebody who's online with you. They can see you through a camera. You check your ID. You have to show your ID, and you're there. So they check your ID. They also ask you security questions, which those are connected to your credit card services kinds of questions. And then they also are locked into your screen. And so you essentially turn off the internet access. They stay with you while you're taking your test. They can answer technical questions. And that's how that service works. It's a fee service.
There's another service that's a little more, there's another product called Secure Exam, which is essentially a little webcam on a stick that does a 360 view of your room, and it records it for later viewing, rather than having someone live there.
So there are a few services.
And Jim brings up a good point, because as everybody will attest to, that every faculty member who gives a test has a different level of comfortability with ethics and cheating and those things. I don't know what Jim's is, and it's up to him, and that's his deal. If Jim happens to be that personality where he's really tight on security, he's going to need those things. But there's going to be other faculty members who say, well, I have a different level of feeling about this, and what are those kind of issues that we need to do. But that important point here is that there's going to be those people on the COSI, okay, who are going to say, okay, look, you know, academic integrity is absolutely the single most important thing that you have to have. And you got to deal with those when you get these courses approved, and you got to figure out how to do that. Are we going to have the money to have these courses, these kind of things? That's the other question.
So we're going to need to go ahead and move on, and I think that we'll still have time for the questions. Our last presenter, Carl, is going to present things. Thank you, Roger. So Carl Whithaus from UC Davis.
Great, excellent, thanks. So I'm delighted to be the last speaker with 20 minutes before lunch. I'm also delighted to, I was really delighted with Frank's talk yesterday and his point that less is more, and I sort of like Roger's embodiment of that in terms of 2 PowerPoint slides, but I have a confession to make. I actually went home after Frank's talk and said, that was so great, I'm going to add a few more slides. So I have 20 slides in 20 minutes. We'll see how this goes. In some ways, my talk is about something very different than multiple choice exams. We're really thinking about writing assessment. And I wanted to talk about the problems of writing assessment, both in terms of first-year writing courses, but then also how you can use writing in different disciplinary courses. But before I get into that, I wanted to go back, and here are the 4 slides that I added, is I wanted to talk about the particular project that I'm working on. And this is a 3-campus collaboration from the get-go between Davis, Irvine, and Santa Barbara. There are actually 5 PIs working on this, and we have 24 different project team members. I affectionately call this my herd of cats. In any case, what we decided to do for the project when we initially proposed it was we looked at the curriculum of the first-year writing courses at Davis, Irvine, and Santa Barbara and determined out of all of our different articulations of learning outcomes, there were sort of 5 shared areas. And this was developing students' ability to be aware of writing for different audiences and purpose, ability to incorporate evidence and data, ability to use conventional prose styles, also to work on collaborative writing tasks, and then to reflect on what they've learned both about the writing process and the writing product, and to take those things with them, not necessarily to other humanities courses, but in fact moving across the disciplines, so writing in disciplinary context. The idea is that first-year comp is preparing students to write in a variety of different environments in the upper division. Thinking about that as the background and how we could build on that, one of the things that we've insisted on is that, in fact, we're not building a whole complete first-year composition course that you can just sort of take and plug and play. We're using each of those 5 areas and building 3 to 6 different modules for those areas where you might be able to put this together to build a full course at the end, but you could also use some of those modules in conjunction with other disciplinary-based courses. So for instance, you might end up wanting to use how to incorporate evidence in a history writing course and just pull that one little module of those 6 on incorporating data and evidence, and that sort of informed what we were doing. The other thing I think that was important about the writing project is we really wanted to try to figure out what modes worked best. That is, if we were developing these forms of writing instruction that went online, does it work best if we use them as supplements for face-to-face courses in a hybrid environment where instead of the class meeting for 2-hour-and-a-half sessions with the graduate student instructor twice a week, have one of those meeting types and repurpose that other hour-and-a-half for online form of delivery so students are actually learning how to write by, big surprise, actually writing, or if we could, how it would work in a purely online environment. So part of what we were setting up is a comparison between these 3 different modes of delivery. And then the last thing I want to say here is we had sort of a complicated merger of systems. In fact, at Santa Barbara, Moodle was the system that was used for delivery. Davis, we use Sakai, not for online or hybrid, but as a supplement for face-to-face instruction. And at UC Irvine, they use the Writing Studio for delivery of fully online classes already. So we're sort of merging these three different systems, as well as talking about the slight differences in curriculum between Davis, Irvine, and Santa Barbara with first-year writing courses. So that's the background. I just wanted to show this in terms of our original timeline project, which you'll notice differs very much from the September 2012 launch date. We were planning to launch immediately this summer. In fact, UC Irvine is doing the online courses, but some of this other stuff, I think we need to build a beta first. And so this is probably our more realistic timeline. You'll also notice my sort of quirky middle line of pulling our three things together. And I'm doing a miracle happens here, not just to be difficult for Kirk, but there's a fantastic cartoon that shows a bunch of scientists working on an equation, and they're working through it, and they got a couple of steps, and all the equations are up there for 1 and 2, and then there's the results down at the end, and step 3 says, a miracle happens here. And I sort of feel that I hope the miracle happens both in terms of the Common Learning Management System, but also in terms of Faculty Senate. I do think it will happen, and we will get there, but there'll have to be adjustments. In any case, we're now thinking we're probably working over 2 years, and I'm very happy to see that, in fact, we're listed as launching in August, September of 2012. So, in fact, Don Quinn, we're right on time for the second module. So now to what I wanted to talk about today with that sort of context in line. Problems and potentials when grading writing online. And the first 3 things are issues that I think will be shared. This question of cheating or plagiarism, in some ways it relates very much to what Roger and Dan were talking about earlier in terms of test security. How do you make sure that the people that are writing the papers are actually writing their own papers? A second thing when talking about grading writing and even teaching writing courses or integrating writing into disciplinary classes is the thing that Roger just mentioned with 500+ students and GE requirements. The teaching of writing takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of time not because it's hard to show students how to integrate a quote into a paper and then actually talk about that, but because you constantly have to give feedback. It's how the students test out. It's almost like teaching of writing is easy. I can give you Strunk and White. I can give you a driver's handbook and let you go really fast, but it's the practice of it, right? You don't want someone driving just reading a driver's handbook. They've got to go and do it and drive the car a bit. Same thing with writing, and it's that constant feedback and response. So it's the workload that's a problem in terms of assessing writing and helping students improve. And then I think there's an interesting discussion about form and content and the split, because in some ways, the teaching of writing can be seen as just the teaching of form, the teaching of mechanics, the teaching of how you put together a formal essay and write in a particular genre. But I think as we get to more advanced forms of writing and we start doing disciplinary-based writing, content and form merge. It's hard to sort of peel the onion and just have one side of the form-content divide. So I'm going to suggest at the end some solutions, which is thinking about writing as writing to learn, and then the distinction between formative and summative assessment. So first on to cheating and plagiarism. Here's a paper. Here's a paper that a student turned in a first-year composition course. Actually, it was a second semester course. And it was about argument. It was the research paper at the end of the class. And here's the grade that the student got on it. And I gave it back to the student. The student came up to me and he said, "Why did I get a D on this paper? My history teacher gave it a B+, and my poli-sci teacher gave it a C+. Now, on one level, there's a very simple moment. Cheating, wrong, bad student. But I think the student's confusion, work of repurposing, whatever was happening with that student there, actually reflects a larger problem with the way that we think about writing and do writing assessment. That is, there's this tendency to think of writing assessment and the value of a piece of writing as the relationship between the writer and the text. Student A produces a text. It either satisfies the assignment, doesn't satisfy the assignment. The meaning and significance, the assessment of that piece of writing is how well the writer performs in a particular text. I'm going to go back, and this will make the humanities folks happy. This is Aristotle. This is the rhetorical triangle. A text has meaning between the writer, the text, and the reader. That is, when different people read a piece of writing, the meaning, the value of that text shifts. And so part of what I want to make us think about here is how, when we're doing writing assessment, how when we start teaching writing online, do we capture different readers, and do we incorporate response and students' ability to respond to feedback as part of the grading, part of the assessment of a piece of writing? So you can't do a timed one-shot exam at the end, multiple choice, or even a written 50-minute exam if you want to get this sense of writing is situated and students' skills as writers as their ability to respond to the demands of particular audiences. So that's sort of the first point I want to make here. And I think in terms of the way that we're working on collaboration and incorporation of data and evidence with this online pilot project, we're thinking about this model of situated writing assessment. I wanted to note one other thing real fast, maybe as something for us to follow up on later in conversation. This notion of translation software with writing is really intriguing. 2 years ago, I was a huge proponent of common tools. That is, students are in my writing class, let them write with the natural tools that are available to them. Let them work in Microsoft Word, even if they're doing time. So what if there's spell check and grammar check? Let them use the tools that they'll be writing with in the workplace. There's this interesting moment of Google Translator now. If you let students use anything available on the web and they're writing an in-class exam, students can go and plug in Chinese and have the sentence spit out in English. Who's writing? What's their ability? It's sort of interesting question. Is this cheating? They know the idea, they know the concept that they want to put in, but then the software is doing the translating. Just something to think about. Here, this notion, my second thing. So first we were talking about cheating and plagiarism. Second, this notion of workload. Listen, whether you're doing commentary in an online class or even face-to-face, and you're doing things like changes in terms of, instead of saying the ancient Grecian Aristotle, and you want the student to change it to the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, or if you want to make changes from subject-verb agreement, within this document there is a great deal of pathos utilized, which appeal strongly. You want it to be appeals. You're doing those small level of changes, or you're making big comments like, you're doing important work in this paragraph, but the highlighted sentences imply that your audience doesn't understand these rather basic biological facts. If you're doing this sort of commentary, it takes a lot of time. And we're really talking about utilization of TA time, faculty time in writing courses. I'm not sure that there's any way around it. Teaching of writing is a time-intensive thing. But to think about some of these issues, the content and form separation, how do you do that? And I wanted to have just one other note, and this sort of fits along the Google Translator line. There's been a lot of work done on automatic essay scoring. ETS has E-Rater. I think most writing instructors hate the idea of automatic essay scoring to grade for content or even to evaluate mechanics. I think there's been some interesting work done on very short-formed essays and using automatic essay scoring semantics to score content of pieces that are sort of less than 250 words. And it might be an intriguing thing to think about in terms of if you were having students write short pieces, less than 250 words in content area courses, is there a way that you could combine these with more project-based, other types of writing and really help students learn. So another thing for us to think a little bit about, and I could talk about particular programs during the Q&A session. Now, in terms of in terms of writing to learn and formative and summative assessment, I think an important way to think about writing, whether you're doing it in a first-year comp class or whether you're thinking about it in a discipline-based course, is writing to learn doesn't necessarily mean that every piece of writing has to be graded. Writing in and of itself and having students work as writers can be valuable in and of itself to learn content knowledge. And so it's one idea that I sort of wanted to plant. And the other thing is I want to talk about the difference between formative and summative assessment. Let me see if we go here. If we think about the grading of writing, the tendency has often been to put a lot of emphasis on how do you grade the final student paper. And if you do that and spend most of your time commenting on the final student paper, you're valuing this writer-text relationship. Rather than if you provide more feedback on the summative, on the formative end, that is in the beginning and the middle of the process, you or the TA is providing more commentary and the student is responding to that. In fact, at the end, the student actually, the most valuable thing, well, a lot of times what the student values at the end, you know, they'll flip to the paper, at the grade at the end, and if they get a C, oh man, he didn't get me, that's it. They don't go through and read all the other commentary. They'll read all that commentary earlier on in the process. So one of the things that I'm encouraging us to think about with the online is how to do more formative assessment and less summative. If the comment that gets read at the end is A, B, or C, and that's it, that might be all you need on the final version of the paper. You would want to put more commentary earlier on in the process. And I think online course, this just ramps it up almost by a power of 10, the value of providing more formative commentary on writing and less summative. And given time, I think I'm going to skip this discussion of how we incorporate feedback and also peer commentary, that is peers writing review memos in a writing and engineering course, and those feedback, the memos themselves being graded, but also feeding back into other student work. And you see here sort of a sequence of 4 review memos where they're replying to each assignment. And it's a sequenced assignment where it takes response and feedback and builds it into the final group engineering report that students are writing in our upper division writing and engineering course. Skip those. So the questions that I want to end with today and really would like answers from, or at least discussion about, is how do different tools, media, and means for response affect the quality of peer and instructor responses? And how do these different tools for response and feedback affect learning, both content and writing? So those are some questions I want to leave you with.
So we're at noon right now, and we have time for a couple of questions, but maybe we can do a discussion group on assessment. Okay. And I apologize to Carl and to everybody that we're running out of time, but we also want to make sure that we stay on schedule for the rest of the day. So a couple of questions.
So I wanted to talk about the cheating issue that has appeared in both of the last 2 discussions, and to first highlight the ways in which this is not a new online problem, but also an existing, real-world problem. Because I majored in a discipline within humanities, philosophy, and then pursued a master's degree in the same field, where I would guess that a vast majority of the courses I've taken in my lifetime asked me to write papers outside of class and turn them in by some deadline. And so in those real-world face-to-face courses, there was always the possibility that I was hiring someone to write my papers for me, And maybe like the UCLA students who don't believe Obama's a citizen, there might be someone out there who could bring themselves to believe that I've spent the last several decades, right, hiring people to write all my papers for me. But at a certain point, right, I think we have to stop worrying about risks that are so remote, right, that the efforts we spend trying to counteract them, so far exceed the possible gain we could get from those efforts that our worries have become irrational, right? The reality is that a well-designed paper assignment or even a well-designed multiple choice exam taken online can contain so many class-specific features that the only person you could hire to cheat for you would be someone in the same class, right? And if a student has to go around soliciting their classmates to cheat for them, then after a couple times, somebody's going to rat them out, right? You know, it's just not a strategy for success that's going to work for somebody. And so when people get worked up about, you know, online is going to just, you know, cause this rampant cheating, I think, well, one, we've had this problem forever, so let's calm down, right? You know, and then second, no, right? You know, it's going to be hard to do this as a strategy for your entire degree or something like that. And so we should just take a deep breath and do some reasonable things, but maybe it's focus on test design that you know will test things that are unique to your class, right? That's where your efforts would best pay off. And hiring people to put in security cameras and show IDs and all this other stuff is sound and fury signifying nothing.
And just to respond to that quickly is I think a well-crafted assignment, particularly with writing, where you have students drafting and teachers are responding to those drafts, you really start to see how an individual student is working their voice, the moves and changes that they make. So it almost makes this sense of incorporating response and feedback into the assignment, a way of preventing cheating. I think, though, in part the reason worrying about cheating is that if we start going to an online format and we start having bigger versions of this, I mean, so first-year writing classes, each TA is designing their own set of assignments. You don't have the duplication of assignments easily from section to section, so it's those 25, those 25, those 25. But if we have a standardized curriculum that's delivered to 5,000 students who are scattered between Shanghai and Moscow and Berkeley, the potential of cheating, one of 5,000 students, you write a couple of other people's papers and you make the equivalent salary of a week or something, yeah, it's pretty nice. So I do think there is a little bit of a difference between face-to-face and online, and so that's just a comment.
At the conference that I went to in Hong Kong in the winter, I went to a lot of sessions on assessment because it is so tricky. And the Chinese and Korean systems used a much more collaborative and holistic approach to assessment, and they set up portfolios for students. And there was a lot of emphasis on peer-to-peer learning, and then you could set different privacy levels so that different people could be involved in the assessment and watch the student grow over time. So that could be, in the case of high school students, it could be the parents and the teacher, and it could be open to your friends, or it could be just you and the teacher. There were all these different levels of privacy so that you could have a whole community assessing, and or you could just have that one-on-one relationship. But there was also a lot of emphasis on feedback from students, which helps to eliminate the cheating problem, I think, too, because it gets rid of that eyes on your own paper mentality, and it's all hands on deck mentality, and then you're all passing information back and forth. So if anybody's interested in those portfolio systems, I'm happy to.
I think you can also combine those portfolio systems where there are artifacts in those portfolio systems that show individual timed exams. And you could even incorporate in, I mean, the suggestion of using the UC extensions for the computer science course. You could have people have a exam and have their score on that incorporated in a portfolio that also showed projects, and those projects could cut across writing and CS and other places. But portfolios, I think, are a very good idea that we ought to think about.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, panel.